So see the first question. I think first question is something which we have discussed very extensively yesterday. Everyone is agreeing. If everyone agrees, then we'll move on to the second question. Everyone agrees? Yesterday we have discussed. Are you able to see the screen? Am I audible?
Yes, sir. We are able to see the screen.
So this ninth question, in a very exhaustive and extensive way, we have discussed yesterday about the Gandara School of Art. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Whoever attended yesterday's class, they must be knowing it.
Yes, sir.
Just to revise, in the introduction, you will write about the timeline of Gandara School of Art. Timeline of Gandara School of Art. Okay. And its location. And who patronized it. In the body, here you will have the side headings of Romans or Central Asians and then Greeks. Bluish sandstone resembling Apollo god. More masculine features. Here, halo. Okay, halo. Built was similar to Roman gods. Okay. Here, extended jaw. Okay. And then you can give the examples of Bamiyan Buddha. Bamiyan Buddha. And then conclude by giving that how important this school of art is to depict the confluence of various cultures. Is it clear? Is the ninth question clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
I don't think anyone has written this. Okay, you have written. Up to 7th century, I'm not sure, because by the time other schools of art came. Okay, up to 5th century you can write because Taxila was important up to 5th century.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, dressing of Buddha, artistic forms. It's almost the same answer like yesterday, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Conclusion is good. Okay. Yeah. See the 10th question. Evaluate the nature of Bhakti literature and its contribution to Indian culture. 10th question. Take a couple of minutes. Very nice question and a very recent question. So these kind of questions are coming in the recent UPSC papers, and you should be aware of it. Evaluate the nature of Bhakti literature. Evaluate the nature of Bhakti literature and its contribution to Indian culture. So you should evaluate the Bhakti movement with regard to its Bhakti literature and its contribution to Indian culture. Yeah, what are the important points for the 10th question? Anil, Prasad, Santosh, Soumya and Vasavi. What are the important points? Seems like either you people have not written the answer, or if you have written from somewhere. Okay. So what is the question about? Evaluate the nature of Bhakti literature and its contribution to the Indian culture. Okay. Read it multiple times. It is exclusively talking about Bhakti literature and not Bhakti movement. Of course, Bhakti literature is part of Bhakti movement. That is no doubt about it. But then don't discuss too much about Bhakti movement. Within Bhakti movement, you should focus on Bhakti literature and its contribution to what? Indian culture. So it is basically, the question is Bhakti literature. What are the important aspects of Bhakti literature and its contribution to Indian culture? So literature's contribution to culture will primarily be language only. And if there are other art forms or something, what are they? You understood the demand of the question? You understood the demand of the question?
Yes, sir.
So basically it is asking you Bhakti movement contribution to Indian culture. This is the question. Okay. So first, what you have to do here is you need to mention what are the important Bhakti literature you know. For the first year, you'll write introduction. In the introduction, you'll write about the significance of Bhakti movement. So you'll say in the medieval India, Bhakti movement was a revolutionary movement which could integrate masses, and it started from South India and spread to North India. And the main medium through which the Bhakti movement tried to spread was through literature. So you're trying to bring the demand of the question in a proper way, with proper coherence. And then you will come to the body. Here you will speak about, first is nature of Bhakti literature, because that is the question, nature of Bhakti literature. So what is this nature of Bhakti literature? This is the first side reading. Basically, Bhakti literature use the vernacular languages, vernacular or the local languages. So, for example, Ramcharitmanas was composed in local language. Okay, and then the Bhakti language was inclusive in nature. Inclusive in nature. Anyone who had inclination towards God could be part of the Bhakti movement. Okay. And it brought castes and various sects together. It brought various castes and sects together. Okay. And it gave love for God as the only ideology. This is the nature of Bhakti movement. Okay, love for God. And it did not have very complex literature. This is nature of Bhakti movement. So what is the impact or contribution of this Bhakti movement to the Indian culture? It gave a composite culture when it got integrated with this Sufi movement, and this composite culture is called Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb. Okay. And then growth of regional languages like Telugu, Tamil, Kannada, Awadhi, Bengali, etc. New philosophy of love as medium to reach God. Okay. And then other important is lot of art forms, especially music, dance, and paintings developed during the Bhakti movement. Okay. And in the conclusion, you will mention that Bhakti movement during the medieval times was a soothing factor and a binding factor which could integrate various sections of society and which could empower the downtrodden sections like untouchables and women. Hence, its impact played a crucial role as a binding factor. Clear? This is how you approach this question. I only have written almost 100 to 150 words. Is it clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that is how you approach these kind of questions, by bringing in multiple angles and convincing the examiner that you know all this. Okay. Fine. See the 11th question. Okay. I have not seen the question, right? Anil, you have written?
Yes, sir.
Nature of Bhakti literature. Devotional, unorthodox, elitism, interregional, interreligious harmony. Good. What is the contribution? Linguistic development, music and dance, philosophical growth, assimilation, Okay, good answer. It's a good answer. Okay, right. See the 11th question. Persian literature. Persian literary sources of medieval India reflect the spirit of the age. Persian literary sources of medieval India reflect spirit of the age. Comment. It is again a 2020 question. Yeah. Yes, it's about, you need to mention that what is the Persian literature we are speaking about and how it is speaking about the contemporary society in those days. Okay, you have to establish the relationship between you. If you see, observe, of late there is a lot of focus on literature and what this literature is bringing to the table about the Indian culture. Such things are very frequently coming. So you have to be very careful in knowing the details. So whenever you are reading certain issues of medieval India or ancient India or whatever it is, try to concentrate on the literature. What are the prominent literature written in those period? For example, what was written during Delhi Sultanate, Mughal period, Vijayanagara dynasty, Bahmani kingdom. So all these kingdoms are very important. And when it comes to the ancient time, what about the literary sources during the Gupta period, pre-Gupta, post-Gupta period? So all these are very important. Okay. So when it comes to this question, Persian literary sources of medieval India reflect the spirit of age. So they are saying in what way the Persian literature sources of medieval India are reflecting the spirit of age. Please comment. That is their question. So the question is like this. They're saying Persian literary sources, how they are reflecting the spirit of age in medieval India. Where spirit of age in medieval. So break down the question like this. You will then try to join these dots and you'll get the answer. So obviously you need to mention various Persian literary sources and how they are speaking about those days. So that is the thing. So you can say in the introduction, with the advent of Turks in the Indian soil in the 11th century and the 12th century, the literary landscape, you can say the literary landscape of India changed, and hence we can see a lot of Arabian and Persian literature. Okay. Okay. And then, since what happens is, this is about the literary sources. And now coming to the body. Sorry. So we can say that most of the rulers were having Persian background, and hence lot of people from Persia migrated to these courts, and hence that is the reason why you have Persian literature, right? Persian is not an Indian language. It came from the Persian courts to India when the poets and other people migrated. Okay. So this migration, you can say this migration created a kind of fusion or cultural amalgamation. Created fusion or cultural amalgamation. Okay. So basically the literature of this age It varied from history, court scenes, translations of Indian epics, and also sometimes philosophy. So this is the literature, Persian literature. Now you have to write what are the various literatures you know, and then what are the impact, literatures and impact. So this can be one of the side heading. Here, first you can write about, during Delhi Sultanate, who was the prominent poet. It was Ziauddin Barni. Ziauddin Barauni. This fellow has written a famous book called Tariq-i-Firoz Shahi. And here he has written about nearly 5 to 7 sultans and their administration. So it gives the picture of entire Delhi Sultanate. It gives the picture of Delhi Sultanate. And next, one more poet, court poet of Mughals was Abul Fazl. He has written Ain-i-Akbari. Okay. And then one prominent is Tariq-i-Hind, written by Al-Biruni. So this gives about the contemporary society. Contemporary society of medieval India. Okay. And then one famous poet during that time, Amir Khusrau. He has written a lot of Persian literature and he has written a lot of poems. Okay. And he has written a lot of books on philosophy. Okay. And this philosophy brought Indian literature close to the Persian literature, and this again is called Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb. So Indian literature could be understood by Persians and Persian literature could be understood by Indians because there were continuous translations going on. One prominent translation was by Dara Shikoh. Dara Shikoh, who was the first son of, Shah Jahan, and he translated a lot of Vedas and Upanishads into Persian. So, and to add to that, in the medieval age, there was also Sufi culture, which was prominently impacting the Persian literature. Okay. And then you can say that after mentioning all these points, you can say that medieval period, in the conclusion, you can say medieval period was a kind of confluence of various culture and is probably the root for the present day unity in diversity. Clear? Clear,
Yes, sir.
everyone? So you see the extent of recollection you have to do in this particular question. Okay, and hence do not take the medieval and ancient history easily, because this is now becoming a very important X factor in your mains. Okay, you may think that, okay, if such a difficult question comes, I'll leave it in the mains, but how many questions will you leave in mains? You, out of 20 questions, you may hardly know for 12 to 13 questions. In this also, if you leave 2 or 3, and if you think you write 10 good questions means hardly you may get 5 or 6 marks for question, and for a good answer you'll get only 60 marks. But if you want to score 100 marks, you should attempt these 12 to 13 questions in a very good way, and in remaining 8 questions you should try to attempt by doing proper justice. If you don't know, absolutely don't know anything, then you can leave then you can leave 1 or 2 questions. At least 17 to 18 questions you should always have good command. Okay, so hence for this static content you should not leave any syllabus. That is the bottom line. Some of the best sources, they are not the best sources. Ziauddin Barni Batuta. Okay, you should write proper conclusion and include more points. Santosh?
Yes, sir.
The points which we discussed, right?
Yes, sir.
And then a proper conclusion of to what is the role of this Persian literature.
Okay, sir.
And see the last question for the day. Krishna Devaraya, the king of Vijayanagara, was not only an accomplished scholar himself, okay, but also a great patron of learning and literature. Discuss. Again, a very good question. So take a couple of minutes. Yeah, see this question. Krishna Devaraya, the king of Vijayanagara, was not only an accomplished scholar himself, but also a great patron of learning and literature. So basically here you have established the fact that how he is an accomplished scholar, speak about his works, and then come to the second part of the question, how he is a great patron of learning and literature. So you have to mention about the court poets, that is Ashtadiggajas, and some of their works, and how they have impacted literatures of some of the classical languages like Kannada and Telugu. And you have to finally conclude by saying how his time was a golden phase for literary works. Clear? This is the framework. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So what is the question about? It is asking you about Krishna Devaraya and his patron for learning and literature. Learning and literature. Learning and literature. So this is the question. Now, introduction we have spoken that we have to speak about the timeline of Sri Krishna Devaraya timeline, which is from 1509 to 1529. See, his phase, his greatest phase of Vijayanagara Empire, and he is popularly referred to as Andhra Bhoja. Bhoja means king. Okay. And first, in the body, establish the fact he being a great scholar. How he is great scholar. So you can say he has written some of the very greatest works like Amukta Jambavati Kalyanam. So all these are greatest. Here Amukta is a classic written in Telugu language. This is in Sanskrit language. So himself is a great scholar, great writer, and he has written these two classics in these two languages. And also you can next interrelate saying that he has patronized various poets in his court. And these poets were popularly called as Ashtadiggajas, which means 8 elephants. Okay. And then you can say that some of these poets, you can mention about some of these poets, like you can write about Allasani Peddanna. He is called as Andhra Kavita Pitamaha. Andhra Kavita Pitamaha. Okay. And his popular book is Manucharita. Okay. And you can write about Tenali Ramakrishnadu and his contributions to Telugu language. And you can name few of the other poets like Tikkanna. Okay. Mallanarya. Okay. All these are prominent. Sorry, not Tikkanna, it is Timmanna. Okay, you can write about these poets. You can say that apart from these, foreigners visited during Sri Krishna Devaraya. Foreigners visited during Sri Krishna Devaraya, and they spoke high about the Vijayanagara kingdom. Okay, and these are the important parts you have to write in this answer. Okay, if you can remember few more facts about the Ashtadiggajas and how they have written various works and all, you can write. Okay, and in conclusion, you will write that Vijayanagara phase, Vijayanagara dynasty brought lot of additions to the literary languages and also significantly contributed to art and architecture, which can be seen at its capital Hampi. and hence is remembered as one of those dynasties which has given the cultural upliftment in the Indian subcontinent. Clear? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And see, this question also is lot of, if you see today's questions, I'll just speak about today's questions. Okay, except for the 9th question, 10th, 11th and 12th. 10th also you can manage without facts. Okay. Because it's basically about Bhakti literature, everyone knows it. But coming to the 11th and 12th questions, it is calling for a lot of factual knowledge, and that too based on the timeline. So basically, when we are discussing these questions, because you have read these particular issues in your medieval period, you think you are able to understand. But to sit down and attempt these questions is a very difficult task. So the question comes that how do we do this? So for these kind of questions, basically what you need to do is, don't look at this factual part, okay, because the examiner also is not expecting you to write about all the Ashtadiggajas and their works. He is not expecting you to go in that detail. He is expecting you to know the role of Krishna Devaraya, he himself being a great scholar and he himself being a very good facilitator and patron for various literary works. So the examiner is expecting certain kind of clarity from you with regard to the understanding. Now, what you have to do is, when you read medieval history, basically read it like a flow, and within this flow, try to concentrate. Whenever such important works you come across, try to concentrate and just note down some important works of certain important people. And when you do revision, from this. Again, you need not read the entire medieval. From here, when you do the revision multiple number of times, you will be pretty confident and you can handle any kind of questions which are coming in this pattern, especially factual. And if you see, one of them is a very latest question of 2020. So the pattern in which the UPSC is asking the questions is changing. The conceptual clarity is being tested very highly, and the need of the hour is to have utmost clarity with regard to the concepts. So I hope that is clear. Krishna Devaraya. Okay, good. Yes. Amuktamaliyada Jamboti Kalyanam. Ashtadiggajas, 8 literary luminaries. Yeah. Alasani Pedanna, he has mentioned. Yeah. Timmana Kavi. Okay. Conclusion can be slightly better. So anything you people have to ask about this particular questions and culture? Of course, we are going to do this medieval and culture for next 3-4 days, 3 days at least. Up to Saturday, we are doing this. But what is the difficulty you are facing? I'll just take 3 more minutes or 4 more minutes to take your questions and then we can wind up. What is the difficulty you are facing? Or is it fine? Are you comfortable? Because I am seeing some of you are writing answers. They are fairly good answers. So if you can write this standard of answers without seeing, I would be really happy. If you are referring some resources and writing, that is okay for now. But when you are seeing the question, what is the level of confidence you are having in attempting that? I want to hear from you guys. Soumya, Vasavi, Santosh, Shanta Prasad, Anil. So when you are seeing the question, what is the kind of confidence you are having in attempting it? Shanta?
Yes, sir. A few of questions I
Okay,
have to go.
let me just interrupt you. First, be very frank. Are you writing all the answers without seeing?
No, sir, not all.
So you are
At least
referring to some
50%.
sources.
Yes, sir. 50% questions referring.
Okay, for the remaining 50, what is your confidence like?
Sir, basically I'm preparing for APPSC, sir, not for UPSC. So I don't have that much confidence in all the questions, sir, but trying to attempt.
Okay, but even then the portion is 75% similar, no? Prasad.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and now the groups questions are also coming in line with the UPSC questions only.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes they are directly picking up the previous UPSC questions and pasting them in APPSC. Okay, if you can write answers of UPSC standard, then APPSC also will be very, very comfortable for you. Right?
Okay, sir.
Okay, anyhow, so fine. But then, just try to revise, what I've told you now, try to revise. What about others? Soumya, Vasavi? Vasavi, I think you have written the answers yesterday, but today you have not submitted. Soumya, can you speak, or are you guys on mute? Cannot have access to voice. You don't have access to voice? Do you have access to mic or not? Who's this, Vasavi?
Yes, sir, we have, sir. Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir, Vasavi, sir.
Yeah, Vasavi, tell me, what are you feeling like? Because culture is something very tricky. Okay, many people ignore it, but you can see in GS1 papers how the culture questions are coming. This year, 2 questions of 15 markers came from culture, and people are simply, they are dumbfounded or astonished with the way that question was asked. For that, you need to have a detailed understanding of medieval and ancient India to answer those 2 questions. They are now integrating ancient and medieval.
Analysis, sir.
Yeah, it's not that you have to have facts, you have to have facts and analysis. Okay. So, okay, Soumya also has given her feedback. What about Santosh and Anil? You guys are available?
Sir, in some questions, how to get the dimensions? Like in today's 11th question, I can't get the dimensions.
Today's 11th question. What is that question? Persian. Okay, fine. Next. Anything else? I'll discuss about it. Next. Santosh?
Sir, regarding agriculture, it's kind of always, if I study, after some time I'll forget it, sir. So it's kind of should repeatedly revise, sir.
Yeah, repeated revision is required, especially for these kind of subjects. There is no doubt. So that's what. When you read the textbook in the first context or the first time, try to note down important names and important timelines. And next time you revise these important names and timelines, because revision of entire textbook will never be so possible or so comfortable. Because what will happen is, if you read medieval India or ancient India textbooks, if you sit for revision, they will turn you off. You will not have that kind of zeal. You can revise Lakshmikant 10 times. You'll have the energy of revising Lakshmikant 10 times. but you cannot revise a Satish Chandra or R.S. Sharma 10 times, because that is a psychology which we are coming from, because we are not history students, we are not having that much zeal in art and culture, because most of us are technocrats, okay, either coming from a degree background or a science background or a maths background. So this history will turn you off in that context, because this is becoming important as well as relatively difficult when compared to the previous UPSC questions or previous UPSC examinations. It is our duty to make it more interesting. So try to make this is for everyone who will again watch, because some students are not there today, like Sumant, Sriram, Jitender, all you guys who are going to see it later, or if they are not seeing, ask your friends to see today's video. Okay, because today we have some time, I'm trying to spend some time to actually read the textbook, make important points, revise those important points, and revise multiple times. So that is how only you are going to master the culture, or as a matter of fact, medieval or ancient. Now coming to the angle pointed out by Anil, that how he is unable to get the dimensions of the question, like Persian literary sources of medieval India reflect the spirit of age. Because you are not aware of the content, Anil, you could not get the dimensions. Now, the moment what I told you, if you implement it, like making notes of the subsections and writing important names, when you write about Aina Akbari, Ziauddin Barauni, and then you know how the Feroz Shah Tughlaq, during that time he has written about 5 sultans. If you read about Amir Khusro, if you write all these prominent names, you will see that these prominent names are inevitably related to Persian literature. And even without knowing the question, and even without exactly understanding the crux of the question, you will come to know that you have to talk about these personalities. That is only possible when you have content. That content comes from revision, and that revision you can do by making notes of your textbook. That bulky textbook, you should have a separate note. And when you have notes, you will be in a really comfortable zone to revise them. And when you revise multiple number of times, I am very sure, as I told you many number of times, follow the timeline approach. And the moment you follow the timeline approach, you'll all be comfortable in attempting these kind of questions. You need not write 100 out of 100 points. These questions are basically tough for 9 out of 10 aspirants. So even if you do decent justice, as like writing 6 points out of 10 important points, the examiner is still impressed by you guys, because you have attempted it in a very rational, in a particular way. Clear?
Yes, sir.
So please pass on this message to all your friends, because I wanted to make this particular effort with regard to this ancient and culture. So, okay. On that note, we'll all leave, and we'll meet tomorrow at standard time of 9 p.m. Okay. Yeah. Bye.
Good evening to all of you. We were discussing Aristotle's theory of state. And in that context, I'll quickly review what he had said in my last class. We are discussing about Aristotle's view on state. The first important point that we had discussed, that man is by nature a political animal. Means Aristotle had clearly said that man is a social animal and man is also a political animal. And since man is a political animal, man cannot live without state. Okay? Man cannot live without state, man cannot survive without state. And he goes on to say that he who is unable to, he who cannot live in state, or he who can live without state, that is the point. He who can live without state is either a beast or a god, but he is definitely not a man. While talking about the relationship between man and state, Aristotle says that man is by nature a political animal, and anybody who can live without state is certainly either a beast or a god, but he is definitely not a man. All right. And then he goes on to say that out of different institutions existing in society, the state is the most prominent, most important of them. All right. And he says that the state is the highest of all associations existing in society, and it comes into existence for the sake of man. It comes into existence for the sake of life, and it remains into existence for the sake of good life. All right. What Aristotle says that the state comes into existence for the sake of life, and it remains into existence for the sake of good life. See, what is the primary objective even of a modern state? To make life more convenient for the people. What was the situation in India when we became independent in 1947? And since then, from 1947 till now, 2022, a lot of efforts have been made by the state to create those conditions which make the life of the people much more convenient. So that is why Aristotle says, while talking about his theory of the state, that state comes into existence for the sake of life, and it continues to remain in existence for the sake of good life. So there is a difference. He's making a distinction between life and good life. And the definition of good life would never be complete. So the state would go on creating facilities to make the life more and more convenient for the people. All right. Now, so this statement of Aristotle, that the state comes into existence for the sake of good life and remains into existence for the sake of good life, so that explains the significance that Aristotle is attaching to the state. All right. Another important point while talking about the theory of state, Aristotle had said, and we have discussed that yesterday, and that point is that the state is prior to man. Chronologically, maybe man is prior to state. First came the man, then came the family, then came the society, and then came the state. But chronologically, state man may have come before the state, but in realistic terms, Aristotle says that the state is prior to man. Why? As I have explained yesterday, that man was not man in the true sense of the term. The man that Aristotle talks about is civilized man, is a cultured man. So man learned to be man only during the process, only when the state was created. So that is why it is said that state is prior to man. It is a state which made man man in the true sense of the term. So this is another important point. If you are asked a question on Aristotle's theory of state, so you need to discuss all these different dimensions. All right. One more important point which I had discussed yesterday, that according to both Aristotle and Plato, the state is not the outcome of the contract. There are social contractualists like Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau. These are the thinkers who say that the state came into existence. The state is an artificial institution. Okay, it is a man-made institution. It is created by the state. So people, because of the trouble in which they were living, or whatever may be the reason, they came together, they agreed to enter into a contract, they agreed to enter into a pact, and result of that contract was the state. Outcome of that contract was the state. So they are the people who are known as, they are the theorists who are known as social contractualist theorists. Aristotle says, both Aristotle and Plato say, that it is wrong to consider the state as an outcome of the contract. In fact, the state is the product of the nature. This will be more clear when I discuss the origin of state according to Plato. Right. So Aristotle says that it is wrong to think that there can be some contradiction in the interest of man and the interest of the state. This is also the point that you need to highlight when you are talking about the theory of the state. That, according to Aristotle, there is absolutely no contradiction between interest of man and interest of the state. Why? Because it is a state which is making man in the true sense of the term. So there is no question of contradiction between the interest of state and interest of man. So what is in the interest of man is in the interest of the state, and what is in the interest of state is in the interest of man. This is what Aristotle has said. Okay. Now, what about the origin of the state according to Aristotle? Aristotle says that it is in the nature of man. The state, creating a state in the nature of man, and not the nature of man, it is basically needs of man. The correct term to use is the needs of man. It is the needs of man, and it is the need of man that has created the state. Means we are now discussing origin of state according to Aristotle. We are discussing origin of state according to Aristotle. So Aristotle says that the state is the need of the man. All right. Why it is in the need of man? Aristotle says that state is the need of man. Why state is need of man? Because he says that nature has not made man self-sufficient. That is why he requires the state. While explaining about the origin of state, Aristotle says that state is the need of man. Why? Because nature has not made man self-sufficient. As man cannot fulfill all his needs alone, so he creates a family. This is how state is evolving. This is how state has originated, according to Aristotle. It says that man cannot fulfill all his needs, so he creates a family. He needs a family. Family alone cannot fulfill all the needs of man. Okay? Means family can fulfill some of the needs of man, but family cannot fulfill all the needs of the man. All right? So some needs of man can be fulfilled by the family, but all needs of man cannot be fulfilled by the family. So he creates a village. All right? So first, man creates a family because he is not self-sufficient, and family is also not capable of solving all the needs of man. So he creates a family, and family also not self-sufficient. So family creates a village. So man creates a village, and again, village can fulfill some of the needs of man, but village also is not capable of fulfilling all the needs of man. So man creates the state. Okay, the state that Aristotle talks about is the city state. You have to understand that point. Aristotle is not talking in terms of the modern nation state, which is very huge. Aristotle is talking about, when Aristotle talks about the state, it is the city state. So don't get confused. Don't get confused. So he says, man cannot fulfill all his needs, so he creates a family. Family can meet some of the needs of man, but not all the needs. So he creates a village. Village also can fulfill some needs, but not all the needs. So comes the state, becomes the city state. Right. Now, means, so a state comes into existence chronologically. All right. Now it looks like, as I have said earlier, that man is prior to state. But as Aristotle has clearly said, I have been repeating that, and you can be asked this question: man, state is prior to man, explain. So that is why I'm repeating it time and again. So Aristotle says that it is impossible to lead a good life without the state. It is not the question of leading only a life. Aristotle says the state comes into existence for the sake of life, and it remains into existence for the sake of good life. So what is the objective of Aristotle? The objective of Aristotle is to create a good life for the people. All right. So Aristotle says, why he says that the state is prior to man? Because man becomes man in the true sense of the term only when state comes into existence, because it is a state which fulfills the needs of the state. All right. And it is impossible to lead a good life without state. So Aristotle goes on to say, to live without a state requires a superhuman qualities of either a beast or a god. If you can live without the state, or living without the state, according to Aristotle, requires superhuman qualities of a beast or god. Okay. This means life which can truly be called a life. All right. The life which can be truly called a life can only be realized in a state. That is why the state is prior to man. All right. Now, Aristotle goes on to say, when he talks about the theory of state, that the state is highest of all associations, and that is why it deserves highest obligation for man. Means people should be duty oriented towards the state, because the state is highest of all associations, so it requires highest obligation from the man. And without state, why man should be obeying the state? Why man is obliged to obey the state? Man is obliged to follow the dictates of the state or rules of the state, because without the state, good life is not possible. Virtuous life is not possible. So that is why man must obey the state. All right. Now, going further, while talking about his theory of state, let us try to understand the relationship between state and man. So one point I have already explained, that the state is prior to man. Second point is that there is a book, and I have suggested you that if you are interested in reading that book, O.P. Gauba's book, O.P. Gauba's Political Theory. In that book, he beautifully explains by giving an example while explaining the relationship between man and state. All right. It is a relationship of whole and part. The state is a whole and man is a part. He says, he explains, he says that there are different parts of the body of a man: a leg, a hand, ears, eyes. All right. But without these parts, body is useless. Without these parts, body is useless. Again, without the body, the parts of the body will not be able to perform. That is the relationship between individual and the state. He is drawing a parallel between the parts of the body, and the body as a whole. All right. So what he says is that your leg, your hands, your eyes, your ears, your heart cannot function without the body. All right. Or there is a vice versa also. Your body without these parts are useless. All right. Similarly, individual without state is incomplete, because it is the body which makes the part of the body function. So that is a relationship between parts of the body and the body as a whole. All right. So he says that individual without state is incomplete. All right. Again, it is the state, or it is the body which makes, which gives. It is the body which, when it acts as a whole. So similarly, it is the state that makes man in the true sense of the term. So the relationship between man and the body, different relationship between different parts of the body and man is similar to relationship between different individuals and the state. He goes on to say further, goes on to explain further. He says that each organ of a living being performs certain specific functions. Your hands, your eyes, your ears, they perform certain specific functions. Similarly, each individual performs different functions for the state. There are the plumbers, there are electricians, there are the professors, there are the teachers, there are the doctors, there are the laborers. So everybody is doing, every individual performs different functions for the state, or every individual undertakes different responsibility for the state. All right. As the body consists of different organs, and all organs performing certain specific functions. Your hands, your eyes, your ears, your heart, every organ, your brain, every organ performs certain specific functions. Similarly, every individual who lives in the state performs certain specific functions. All right. So body ensures, the human body ensures that there is a close harmony in different parts of the body. You get a command from the brain and your hand starts moving. You get a command from the brain, your legs start moving. So what he's trying to explain, that this harmonious function of different parts is possible because of the body. Similarly, the state ensures that different individuals, there is a connectivity, there is a communion between different individuals, all right? And because society is based on division of labor, that every person performs different kind of functions for the state, all right? And this division of labor in society, this division of labor in the state ensures that there is a proper cooperation, proper coordination, all right, in the society. So in order to provide harmonious function of different parts of the body is important. Similarly, to ensure the harmony in the relationship among people, state is important. So Aristotle is drawing a parallel between man and the body, and between parts of the body, and similarly, so this can also be described as an organic theory of state. Okay, so different individuals, they are the part, they are the organs, and state is a whole. All right. So part of the organ, that is also explained as the organic theory of state. So if you are asked a question on Aristotle's theory of state, these are the points that you need to highlight. All right. Now, let us try to evaluate critically. Let us do the critical evaluation of Aristotle's theory of state as a whole. All right. As we have understood, that study of the state is the core of political science. See, whether you talk about study or see, when we talk about what is politics or what is political science, we say that it is the study of state, government, and power. All right. So the study of state forms the core of political science, right? But there is lack of agreement among different political philosophers, among different scholars, about the state itself. What is the state? What should be the function of the state? Okay, whether somebody would say that classical liberals would say the function of the state should be minimum. All right. When you come to the welfare state era, you are giving responsibility of welfare functions to the state. All right. Again, the libertarians, when they came, all right, again, or the neoliberalism, again, going back to the classical era, liberty for the people, minimal function for the state. So different talk about Karl Marx, He doesn't believe, he believes in creation of a stateless society, doesn't want a state. For Plato and Aristotle, the state is the most important institution. For people like Hobbes, the state is an outcome of contract. Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau, state is an outcome of contract. For people like Plato and Aristotle, state is a natural institution. When I'm trying to say is that different political philosophers, different political theorists, different scholars, they have a given different opinion on the state. All right. So keeping those things in mind, keeping in mind the different opinions of different scholars about the state, Aristotle's theory of state or Aristotle's view on the state would just be considered as Aristotle could be considered as belonging to one school of thought, which considered a state as a natural institution and that it performs certain functions and it comes into existence for the sake of life and remains into existence for the sake of good life. So this is just one perspective. So Aristotle's theory of state is just one perspective of the state. So as I've told you, different scholars have given different perspective of state, and Aristotle's theory should also be considered as one of the perspectives. Now, the second theory that I will take up while talking about Aristotle is Aristotle's theory of slavery. Aristotle is a thinker, and Aristotle is a thinker who has provided justification for the institution of slavery. In modern times, any philosopher justifying slavery as an institution would never be acceptable. But Aristotle was a conservative thinker, and it is said that he was conservative of conservatives, as I have tried to explain while giving a background about Aristotle yesterday. All right. So Aristotle is justifying the institution of slavery. Let us try to understand what is the theory of slavery as given by Aristotle by one. The first important point, the basis on which Aristotle is justifying the institution of slavery, it says that there is a wide differentiation in the intellectual capability of the people. Some people are intellectually capable, some people are intellectually not capable or very less capable. What my point? I mean, there is a wide differentiation in the intellectual ability of the people. This is the first important point. And according to Aristotle, larger majority in a state or larger majority in a society, they are sluggards. They are dull. He uses the term dunes, D-U-N-E-S, or sluggards. Those people who are very dull, incapable, inefficient. So he's using a term for that. Dunes and sluggards. That is the term, exact term which is used by Aristotle. What Aristotle says is that, point number one, there is a wide differentiation in intellectual abilities of the people. Number two, the larger majority of society, they are sluggards. They are dull, they are incapable, inefficient, and whatever you may call it. All right. And he says, larger majority of the people, since they are sluggards, dull, inefficient, so in any system, they will always be at the bottom. He's a very conservative thinker. I told you yesterday he's conservative of conservative. So that is why his viewpoint is like this. So it says that in any system, in any political system, they will always be at the bottom. All right? Means he is envisaging the existence of two different classes of people, one which is intellectually capable and one which is who is intellectually incapable. All right. So he says that in any system, such people would always be at the bottom. All right. And Aristotle says that such people, who the sluggards, the dull people, the larger majority, such people must be ruled. They cannot rule. They must be ruled, if possible, by taking their consent, and if consent is not coming, then without consent. What he says, such people must be ruled, if possible, by consent, and if not possible. I mean, if consent is not forthcoming, then without consent also, they must be ruled. I mean, such people are born to be ruled, according to Aristotle. So, those people who are proficient in mental work, intellectually, they're very sound, and those who are capable of doing mental work. So those people who are proficient in doing intellectual work or mental work, they will be known as masters. They will be called masters. And those who are proficient in physical work, not in mental work, means those who can work from upper part of the body, okay, they will be known as masters. And those who are working from the lower part of the body, they would be working as a physical laborers. All right. So those who are proficient in mental work, they will be known as masters. And those who are proficient in physical work, they will be known as slaves. So that is how he demarcates society. He demarcates society between masters and slaves. All right. Now, if we look into the Greek political thought, Aristotle belonged to the Greek society. So in Greek political thought, intellectual work is always superior to the physical work. Remember Plato? All right. Those philosopher king, because of the education, because of the training, they are intellectually superior. So they are the rulers. Those who do not qualify the first test, they became the laborers. They are said to have a quality of quality of what you call quality of a copper, men of copper. So they become laborers in society. All right. So in Greek political thought, whether we talk about Plato or we talk about Aristotle, intellectual work is always superior to physical work. So producing class, the working class in Plato, is inferior to the class of the philosopher king or the class of what you call the soldiers. All right. So in Greek political thought, intellectual work is always considered as superior to the physical work. Right. Obviously, intellectually capable people will become the masters and physically capable people will become slaves. All right. Now, not only that, Aristotle, if you study his book Politics, you will be shocked. But you will not find it anywhere except in the original work of Aristotle. That Aristotle even refused to recognize slaves as a full-fledged human being. All right. Just now we have seen that it is a state which is making man in the true sense of the term. Now, Aristotle is not ready to recognize slaves as a full-fledged human beings. He calls slaves as a living tool, a property of their master. So slaves, in Aristotle's thought, they are considered to be property of the masters. What do I point? They are not only the slaves, they are also considered to be property of the masters. Means they can be bought and sold. Got my point? So Aristotle is not able to recognize slave as a full-fledged human being, and it is considered as a living tool for the master of the masters, and it is a property for the master class. Right? Now, Aristotle gives an example. He says that poor farmers, they keep oxes for the physical labor. You know, they to work in the field, they need oxes. All right. Similar. I mean, he's drawing a parallel between oxes and the slaves. How conservative thinker he is. He says that poor man keep oxes for physical labor on his land. Similarly, master keeps slaves for a similar work. What do I point? So Aristotle is considering slaves as a property of the master. If oxes are the property of the masters or the farmers, similarly, slave is the property of the masters. All right. Now, Aristotle goes on to say that slaves do not have the intellectual capability, and there is hardly any possibility of developing their intellectual potential, intellectual capability. He says that slaves are incapable of moral and intellectual excellence because manual and physical work which they have to undertake that blunts their mind and renders them impossible for any political function that requires a high caliber. Any political function requires a high caliber, and that caliber is lacking in the slaves. Why? Because the physical work which they have to undertake, manual and the physical work, that blunts their mind, all right, and makes it impossible for the slaves to do the functions that requires high caliber. That is how he's explaining and he's justifying the institution of slavery. Now, the essence of all this that I have said so far is Aristotle is a supporter of the institution of slavery, and he goes on to accept that slavery is a natural institution and it is desirable for the society, and some men are slaves by nature, so they can never become the masters. All right. Slavery is a natural institution. It is a functional institution. It performs certain functions. What functions? We'll just discuss that. And he says that some men are slaves by nature and they would remain slaves. All right. Aristotle talks about two kinds of slaves. One, slaves in general, the natural slaves that we are discussing, the people who are intellectually less capable. All right. So they are the natural slaves, slaves in general. And the second slaves that he talks about is prisoners of war. Any war taking place within the Greek city state. So the state which loses the war in the war. Okay. So people would be made prisoners of the war. So according to Aristotle, there are two kinds of slaves. One is the slaves in general, and the second category of slaves is prisoners of war. So they are also the slaves. All right. But the theory of slavery, Aristotle's theory of slavery, is not about those who are slaves by law. Who are slaves by law? Who are slaves by law? According to Aristotle, prisoners of war, they are slaves by law. So his theory of slavery would be applicable, would be concerned with the slaves in general, but it would not be concerned with slaves by law. This it just concerned about those who are slaves by nature. So Aristotle's theory of slavery is applicable to slaves by nature. All right. Now, who are slaves by nature? Again, for example, who are slaves by nature? Aristotle would explain this by saying that who lack the ability to take decision. Who are slaves by nature? Those who are intellectually incapable, intellectually not very proficient. So those who lack ability to take decisions. What we are discussing, I'm trying to answer a question: who is a slave by nature according to Aristotle? So those people who are incapable to take the decisions for themselves. All right. Number one. Number two, those people who do not have the courage to face the consequences of the decision. First, they are not capable of taking a decision. They are not able to take a decision. And secondly, those people who do not have the guts, who do not have the courage to face the consequence of their decision, okay, they also would come under the category of slaves by nature. All right. According to Aristotle, such people who are not capable of taking a decision or who are not capable of facing the consequence of their own decision, such people would always require somebody to take decision on their behalf. Such people would always require somebody to take decision on their behalf. Hence, the role of a master. So they would always require. So they are incapable of taking a decision, and they are also incapable of facing the consequence of a decision. So such people would always require somebody to take decision on their behalf, and hence the role of the masters. All right. Now, but one point I would like to mention here, that Aristotle was not somebody who would be exploiting the slaves. What a point. He is talking about slavery as an institution of utility for the functioning of the state. How? I will explain it within a while from now. So Aristotle was very vocal about the rights of the slaves. What a point. Means there was no abuse of the rights, no abuse of slaves in Aristotle's city-state. Right? It was a responsibility of the state to ensure that slaves are properly treated. Right? And he goes on to say at one place in his book, Politics, so this aspect has been ignored by all the philosophers. Aristotle goes on to say that if slaves develop the intellectual capability, they ought to be emancipated. The one sentence which is written at some place in Aristotle's book, Politics. All right. So this can be known only by the person who has read the book Politics in original. Normally, you will not find the reference of this in different theories. So Aristotle says at one place that those people, those slaves, if they develop the reasoning, if they develop intellectual capability, they ought to be emancipated, they ought to be free. All right. So there is no question of abuse of the slaves. All right. Now, so I've just tried to explain about what is known as who are the people who are slaves by nature. All right. Now, let us try to find out what is the utility of slavery as an institution and how Aristotle justifies this institution of slavery as an institution of utility for the state. He says that what we'll be discussing now, utility of slavery. Point number one, he says that institution of slavery has got a lot of utility for the masters. Why? Because it allows masters to develop their virtues, because they do not have to concentrate on so many work which could be done by the slaves. So the masters can develop and utilize their time in developing their virtues, because they have the slaves working for them to fulfill all his needs. So all the needs or most of the needs of the masters would be met by the slaves, because slaves are working for them. So masters can spend the time, can devote the time in developing their virtues, in developing their qualities, in developing their intellectual capabilities further. All right. And that would be beneficial for the state. All right. Why? Because he has slaves who are working for them. Second important point. He says that the institution of slavery is also beneficial for the slaves. Now try to understand the point. How institution of slavery would be beneficial for the slaves? He justifies this. He says that Because slaves are not capable of taking a decision on their own. So they need somebody to take a good decision for them because they are not capable of taking a decision. So if masters are taking a decision for them, masters are more qualified, more talented, intellectually more proficient. So if masters take the decision, slaves would get a better decision. Slaves are not capable of taking their own decision, so they cannot take a decision. And if at all they take a decision, it would be a bad decision. So if masters are taking decision on their behalf, so they would be getting a better decision, they would be getting a good decision, which would be good for them as well. All right. Now, third, so institution of slavery is useful for the masters, I have explained. Institution of slavery is good for the slaves, that I also explained. Now, Aristotle says that institution of slavery is good even for the entire state or the political system. How? How institution of slavery is good for the state? It says that masters can devote themselves to the better public work. Now, since they don't have to bother about the general works, so they can devote themselves to the public work. They can spend more time for the public work. So it would be good for the political system. All right. Now, that's what it says, that because slaves are working for them, so masters would be getting more time to participate in the affairs of the state. Okay. If they have to bother about all them to fulfill all the amenities of life for themselves, so they would not get a time. So since slaves are working for them, so they would be getting a quality time to participate in the state's affairs or affairs of the state. Right. And this will result into better laws and better policies for everyone. This will result into better laws and better policies for everyone. So this is how Aristotle is saying that slavery, institution of slavery is good for the masters, good for the slaves, good for the political system. And now it says that institution of slavery is good even for the economic system. How it is good for the economic system, how the institution of slavery is good for the economic system. How it is good for the economic system. Let's try to understand. Aristotle says that those who are physically stronger can work for longer hours. Since slaves are physically very strong, so they can work for longer hours. So longer hours, if they work for longer hours, this means more productivity. More productivity means more production, and more production means more economic growth. This is how he is testifying that institution of slavery is good for the economic system because those who are physically strong can work for longer hours, and if they work for longer hours, it will lead to more productivity. More productivity means more economic. All right. Now, this means Aristotle is looking into the institution of slavery from the utilitarian perspective. All right. Meant it is looking into the theory of slavery from the utilitarian perspective, means it is performing the functions of utility for the state. All right. Now, so this is Aristotle's theory of slavery that I have just clarified. Now I will be looking into, before I ask you to put your questions, if you have any, let me deal with the criticism of Aristotle's theory of slavery. All right. Now, Karl Popper. I was referring to Karl Popper yesterday also. Karl Popper, K-A-R-L-P-O-P-P-R. While criticizing Aristotle's theory of slavery, Karl Popper says that Aristotle's defense of slavery as an institution is unnatural and unconvincing. This is what Karl Popper says. He says that Aristotle's defense of the institution of slavery is unnatural and unconvincing, right? Because Aristotle talks about slave by nature. Okay? Karl Popper says no one is slave by nature. If no one is slave by nature, how can we justify, how can the institution of slavery, how can the institution of slavery be justified by the Aristotle as he has done, as he has claimed? Because according to Karl Popper, no one is slave by nature. It is the environment, it is the back, it is your family, it is the society, it is the environment that makes you slave by nature, and that makes you slave. You become a slave, or you are not able to develop intellectual capability, not because it is inherent in you by nature, but because of the environment. So Karl Popper says that no one is slave by nature. Then how can we justify the institution of slavery as has been claimed by Aristotle? This is the first point of criticism that has been explained by Karl Popper. All right. Now, if we look into the institution of slavery in the modern age of democracy, okay, in the modern age of democracy, when we are talking about the human rights, when we are talking about the human rights violation, when we are talking about the human rights and human rights violation, all right, how can the institution of slavery be justified? All right. Now, whether it has a function, whether it performs certain functions for the state or not, all right, whether it is a natural institution or not, whether it has a functional utility or not, even if it has a functional utility, the institution of slavery can never be justified in the modern age of democracy and human rights, even if it performs. Even if institution of slavery performs certain functions of utility, as claimed by Aristotle, it can never be justified in the modern age of democracy, and human rights. All right. Because treating anyone as a slave, if we talk about the modern age democracy, treating anyone as a slave is against the human dignity. All right. Because each man is an end in itself. Each man an end in itself. And nobody has got a right to treat man as a means to an end, because each individual is an end itself. Whether we talk about individualism, whether we talk about liberalism, whether we talk about Marxism, in all the philosophy, what we find that individual is the focal point. In individualism and liberalism, rights and liberty of man is the focal point. Again, in Marxism, rights of man is the focal point. What Marx is fighting for? He's fighting against the exploitation of man. All right. So, in modern age of democracy, if we talk about slavery, if we try to justify slavery, it goes against the human dignity, because each man is an end in itself, and nobody has got a right to treat man as a means to an end. That is precisely the point that we must understand. All right. Means it would be very difficult, even if we try to look into Aristotle's theory of slavery in Aristotle's period. All right. Measuring the ability of a man is a very difficult exercise. There is no yardstick to measure the ability of a man. So how would you determine We are just discussing the criticism of Aristotle. How would we determine that who falls into the which category? Who falls into the category of slaves and who falls into the category of masters? How would you determine? Because according to critics, measuring the ability of a man is not a very easy exercise. So criticizing Aristotle from the point of view of the fact that determining who is slave and who is not a slave is very tedious exercise, very difficult exercise. All right. One more important point when we talk about the criticism of Aristotle's theory of slavery. See, intellectual faculties of the people, intellectual ability of the people develop over a period of time. How can we talk about somebody slave by nature? How can we do that? Because intellectual capability and ability of the people, they develop over a period of time. All right. And they are never constant from birth to death. Intellectual ability of the people. What was your intellectual capability when your age was 6 years? What was your intellectual capability when you were 12 years? What was your intellectual capability when you were 18 years? And what is your intellectual capability when you are 22 years or 23 years? The point that I'm trying to put focus upon, that intellectual faculties of the people, they develop over a period of time and they never remain constant from birth to death. Then how can you be saying that those who are born as a slave, those whom we consider a natural slave, they will remain slave throughout their life? Why? Because intellectual capability is never constant. So there is this is a point which Aristotle failed to consider while justifying the institution of slavery. All right. Because the intellectual capability of the people are never constant. All right. They are never constant. They go on changing from birth to death. There may be increase, there may be decrease. But this point, Aristotle was not able to consider in his theory. That is yet another criticism of Aristotle's institution of slavery. All right. Now, one more important point when we are doing the criticism of Aristotle's institution theory of slavery is that Aristotle's theory of slavery divides society into two fixed categories: masters and the slaves. All right. Means it is never possible to divide the society into two watertight compartments. All right. Means dividing the society, this is the mistake that was done by the Karl Marx also. He divided society between capitalists and the workers. There is no third class. So one of the important reasons for failure of Karl Marx's theory that Karl Marx could never envisage the emergence of a middle class. What my point? So Aristotle also could not think of any other class. So dividing the society into two watertight compartments, all right, of masters and slaves is not a correct point of view. All right. Now, one more important point. Aristotle's theory of slavery goes against the goal of social mobility. See, no society can survive for a longer period of time without the existence of opportunities for social mobility. Possibility of a growth means from a lower class to the lower middle class, from lower middle class to the middle class, from middle class to the higher middle class, and from higher middle class to the higher strata. So in every society, there should be a prospect for social mobility. So Aristotle's theory of slavery or Aristotle's defense of slavery goes against the goal of social mobility, which is the urgent need for socio-economic growth in all the societies. What my point? So this is the criticism of Aristotle's theory of slavery. So we have discussed in detail Aristotle's theory of slavery. Now, if you have any question on this, you can just ask me. If you have any doubt about Aristotle's theory of slavery, you can just ask me. Points are clear? All right. Now we'll be talking about Aristotle's theory of property. Aristotle's theory of property. We have two theories we have done. Aristotle's theory of state, Aristotle's theory of slavery, and now we'll be discussing Aristotle's view on property or Aristotle's theory of property. This is important. You can be asked a question either on slavery or on property. All right. Or theory of citizenship. All right. So what is Aristotle's theory of property? Now, Aristotle's view on property, they are quite different from Plato's view. All right. Yesterday, while comparing Aristotle and Plato, if you remember, I had tried to explain that Aristotle became a critic of Plato, and Aristotle was critical of Plato's theory of property, and because he talked about communism of property, and Aristotle was also critical of Plato's theory of family because it talks about communism of family, communism of wives, and communism of family. All right. Now, so Aristotle's view of property is quite different from Plato's view. All right. Because he had started his theory of property while criticizing Plato's view. All right. Plato had stated that property is not good for the unity of the state. So he restricted the guardian class and the soldier class from the right to property. All right. And he brought them into the category of communism of property. I've explained that yesterday, that the guardian class, that means ruling class, and the soldier class, you cannot have a right to property. All right. Aristotle says that property, as I have explained yesterday also, that property is a time-tested institution, all right, and it performs various functions of utility. And he says, he agrees that there could be some problem with the institution of private property. There could be some problem. But the solution does not lie in abolishing the institution of private property as was done by the Plato, or as was done by the Karl Marx. Karl Marx also talked about abolishing the institution of private property. So both Plato and Karl Marx, that is similarity between Plato and Karl Marx, that both talked about communism. All right. So according to Aristotle, property, he looks into property, institution of property from the functionalist perspective, and say that there are several functions that is performed by the institution of property. So the solution does not lie in abolishing the institution of private property. Rather, the solution lies in reforming the institution of private property. All right. Now, what is the utility of the institution of private property that has been explained by Aristotle? We will be looking into that. All right. So what we are discussing Aristotle's view on property. And in that context, we'll be talking about Aristotle's view on the utility of institution of private property. Means, what is the utility of property? Institution of property as explained by Aristotle. He's a functionalist and he's looking into institution of property from the functionalist perspective. Now, let us look into the point how Aristotle is defending the institution of private property. So Plato was critical and Aristotle is defending. Point number one. He says institution of property is good for the individual and society. It's good for individual and good for society, right? Why it is good for society? Because it gives encouragement to the individual to work hard. Property is the incentive. So it is good for the individual because it encourages people to work hard. And when an individual is working hard, this will automatically lead to social growth. So institution of private property is good for this individual because it encourages him to work hard. And number two, it is also good for the social growth. And not only that, when people have more money, they can donate for the social growth. They can contribute for the social growth. All right. Point number one. Point number two. I should say that having property, even those who have property, that gives them self-respect. All right. So property as an institution provides self-respect for the people. And it doesn't only provide self-respect to the people. See, those people who own property, those people who are rich, those people, they get a good status in society. That is true of our society also. So whatever you may say, according to Aristotle, having the possession of property gives you self-respect, and it is a source of self-love for the individual. It gives you self-respect and it is a source of self-love. You become proud of your earning. You can become proud of what you have earned. All right. So it is a source of pleasure. It is a source of self-love, and the same can be used for improving the society. Same could be used for creating better facilities for society. All right. Now, according to Aristotle, the institution of private property, or when man is possessing property, this automatically develops the managerial skill or management skill of those people who are owning property, because they will learn the skill how to manage the property, how to create wealth, how to get further wealth from the wealth, how to further expand their property. So if you have property, automatically you will be learning the skill of management. You will learn the skill of managing your property. So proper institution of property is a source of skill management for the people. Not only that, that also leads to the development of vigilance skill among the people. So if you have property, you would be more vigilant. To protect the property, you would become more vigilant. So according to Aristotle, institution of private property is a source of managerial skill or skill enhancement for the man, and it is also a source of vigilance skill. So because of property, you develop two kinds of skills. One, managerial skill, and secondly, what you develop is the vigilance skill. All right. Now, another important point. While defending the institution of private property, or while explaining the defense of private property, or while explaining the utility of private property, Aristotle goes on to say that owning of property creates a sense of civic duty. If you want to do something for the society, if for doing something for the society, you need your wealth, you need property. If you have a property, then only you can contribute. All right. Now, see, Sikh community in India and other communities also. In Sikh community, it is very clearly mentioned that 1/10 of the earning they have to donate, okay, for the betterment of the society, for the charitable activities they have to spend. This is clearly mentioned in the Holy Granth, that 1/10 of their earning, okay, so if they earn 100 rupees, 10 rupees out of that, they must spend on philanthropic activities or the charitable activities they have to spend. But the point is, it is only when you have a money, then you can spend for the good civic work. So Aristotle goes on to say that owning of private property creates a sense of civic duty and encourages people to take interest in the affairs of the state. All right. One more important point, Aristotle goes on to say, more property means more tax collection for the state. More property means more tax collection for the state, and the money raised out of tax collection would be used for betterment of money earned out of tax collection could be used for betterment of the community. All right. Now, so Aristotle says the last point about how he's explaining the utility of private property. He says that it is the natural characteristic of man. It is in the natural characteristic of man to have property. Who doesn't want to own property? Everybody wants to own property. Says that the instinct for property is very natural in man. So abolishing the property would be meaning abolishing the instinct of man, killing the instinct of man. So that would not be correct. Aristotle says that man has a natural instinct for property. Everybody wants to earn property or buy property or to create property. So if you abolish the property, you would be killing the instinct of man, and that could result into social disharmony. Abolishing instead of private property could result into social disharmony. So while criticizing Plato, Aristotle has given a different justification for or different utility for the institution of private property that I have just not read. What is the methodology of holding or using private property? What is the method? What is that? Aristotle talks about three kinds of method of holding property and using property. What is the method? He talks about three kinds of method. One method is common ownership and common use. Okay? Common ownership of property and common use of property. Property would be owned in common by the community and would be used in common by the community. One. Number two, common ownership but individual use. All right. Third, individual ownership but common use. So he talks about three kinds of method of holding and using property. The first one is common ownership and common use. Second one is common ownership and individual use. Third is individual ownership but common use. Aristotle is putting his weight behind the third dimension, individual ownership but common use. How and why we'll just explain. Okay. Now, first, let us take up common ownership and common use. What is the problem in this? Aristotle rejects common ownership of the property because, as I was explaining you yesterday, that why he's rejecting common ownership, because common ownership means everyone's responsibility. So Aristotle goes on to say that everyone's responsibility is nobody's responsibility. So this is neither good for the upkeep of the property, nor it is very productive. See, when you are individually owning property, that would be more productive because you would have the incentive to create further wealth, further property out of your property. All right. But when it is owned in common, nobody would be taking interest in that. So you say that everybody's responsibility is nobody's responsibility. So common ownership and common use, all right, and common ownership and individual use both are illogical according to Aristotle. So common ownership is there in the first case also and second case also. Common ownership and common use rejected. Common ownership on individual also rejected. Why? Because when you say the common ownership but individual use, so this will lead to more exploitation. This will lead to more confrontation. Those who are strong, they will not allow the weak people to use the property. You are talking about common ownership and individual use. So, I mean, anybody wanting to use a property which is commonly owned may not be allowed. So it may lead to more, it could be more exploitative. Okay, and it will be more confrontational. So Aristotle is rejecting both common ownership and common use and common ownership and individual use. What he is pleading for? He is pleading for, he is in favor of individual ownership and common use. Okay. Why he is in favor of individual ownership and common use? Because he says, even when the property is owned by the individual, but this should be used for the common interest of the society. Why is in favor of individual use, individual ownership? Because this will be a source of motivation for him, because he is owning the property, so it will be a source of motivation. Number two, it would be a source of self-satisfaction. Number three, it will be a source of self-respect. And number four, it can be used for charity also. So Aristotle is not in favor of only individual ownership and individual use. He is in favor of individual ownership, but common use. So if you are owning property, you cannot use it, and you should not use it only for yourself. You have to use it for others also. All right. So he's suggesting a common use because he is of the opinion that everyone must contribute a part of his profit and a part of his earning for the well-being of society. The point which I was trying to explain a few moments back, that I was referring to Sikhism, I was referring to Sikh Dharma, wherein it is mandatory, where it is recommended that 1/10 of the earning they must contribute for the charitable or the philanthropic activities. So Aristotle says that common use is required. Why? Because everybody must contribute a part of his profit or the earning for the well-being of the society. Why? He says that no one is self-sufficient. No one is self-sufficient. We are all interdependent. We are not only materially interdependent, we are also morally interdependent. No one is self-sufficient, and that is why it is our duty to contribute. So the best system of property is individual ownership and common use. Why? I've given you 4 reasons for this. One, it would be a source of motivation for the people. Second, it would be a source of self-satisfaction. Third, it would be source of self-respect. And fourth, it would lead to charitable activities. All right. Now, 2 kinds of property Aristotle talks about: animate and inanimate. What is animate and what is inanimate? If you have a device, it would be called animate. And those for example, slaves. Slaves are considered to be animate device. Okay. He referred slaves as an animate device. And other devices that you have, non-slave devices that you have, that would be considered the other property other than slaves. They would be coming under the category of inanimate. So slaves is also a property. So as I've told you earlier, that slaves are considered to be the property of the masters. So Aristotle talks about 2 kinds of property, means divides property into 2 groups, animate and inanimate. Slaves is an animate property and animate device, and other than slaves, they come under the category of inanimate device. All right. Now, whatever may be the kind of property, I should say that it is healthy to keep the property. It is whatever may be the kind of device, whether animate or inanimate, whatever may be the kind of property, animate property, slaves, and the inanimate, other properties. All right. It is the responsibility of a man, and it is the responsibility of a man to maintain the upkeep of both the properties. All right. Because property, whether animate or inanimate, they help you in leading a good and healthy life. Okay. So both animate means slave property and inanimate, other than slaves, whatever property you have, All right, the material wealth that you have, it is essential to maintain a good upkeep of your property, both slaves and the non-slaves property, because it will help you in developing a healthy society. All right, now how much wealth you should have. Aristotle goes on to say at one place in his book Politics that acquired wealth should be sufficient enough to lead a good life. What is a good life? It is a very big statement which is used by Aristotle. He has not clarified what is a good life, but he says that property that one should possess should be sufficient enough to lead a good life. But he did not define what is good life, so that will lead to unlimited accumulation of wealth. That could lead to, accepting Aristotle's theory, could lead to unlimited accumulation of wealth, because he did not define what is good life. All right, now he also talked about two kinds of methods, okay, of creating wealth. One is the natural method and is the unnatural method. All right, what are the natural method? Cattle raising, agriculture, hunting, because these are considered to be natural method of acquiring wealth. Cattle raising, agriculture, hunting, these are considered to be a natural way of earning wealth. All right. What are the unnatural method? Procurement of property, okay, procurement of property, buying a property, selling a property, doing trade, buying and selling. These are all considered to be unnatural wealth. Why? Because there is endless growth of wealth. In unnatural wealth, there is a possibility of endless growth. All right, so they are called unnatural. So Aristotle is prescribing two ways of earning wealth. One is the natural wealth, as I've told you, cattle raising, agriculture, hunting. These are the natural way of earning wealth. Unnatural methods are procurement of property, getting involved in trade, buying and selling of goods, buying and selling of services. So this could lead to inordinate growth of wealth. This could lead to endless growth of wealth. So that is why they are called unnatural. So where there is a limitless possibility of growth would be unnatural wealth, and where the limited possibility, they would be called natural wealth. This is what talks about two kinds of wealth. Okay, now, so Aristotle's view on property is important because he is trying to justify the institution of private property, quite in contrast with Plato, and he has explained the functional utility that I have just now explained. But at some place, Aristotle has talked about a limit about endless wealth. So endless wealth, okay, in the unnatural manner is bad for society. At one place he has talked about that. All right. But his views on property is not up to date, and his views on property is criticized also because he considers slave also to be a part of property, animate property, right? But yes, no one can deny that Aristotle's defense of the institution of private property is quite logical, all right? And the justification or the functional utility of the institution of private property that Aristotle has given is still can still be justified. Even in modern times, property is a source of motivation, property is a source of self-satisfaction, property is a source of self-respect, property to be used by charity. This is relevant even in the modern time. Now, that was all about Aristotle's theory of property. So we have discussed Aristotle's theory of state, Aristotle's theory of slavery, Aristotle's theory of property. Now, what we'll take up is Aristotle's theory of citizenship. All right. What is Aristotle's view on citizenship? We are calling it theory of citizenship. It is not actually a theory but it can be considered as his point of view on citizenship. But questions are asked in the name of theory of citizenship. So, what is Aristotle's view on citizenship? First point, when we talk about Aristotle's view on citizenship, Aristotle excludes, I'm not saying includes, Aristotle excludes certain category of people from citizenship rights. His theory starts from exclusion. Aristotle is excluding certain categories of people from citizenship rights for all the time. For example, children, they will not be the citizen. Old people, they will not be the citizen. Women, they will not be the citizen. Slaves, they would not be the citizen. So Aristotle has denied citizenship rights to children, old people, women, and slaves. So 4 categories of people: children, old people, women, and slaves, they have been denied of the citizenship rights. This is the first point that we need to answer. Now, this means, what is the implication of what I have said? What is the implication of this exclusion? The implication is that only adult males with private property, is to be treated as citizens. Okay? Slaves, they do not have any right to private property. So, who could be the citizen of a city-state? Only the adult males, and those adult males who own property. Only adult males having private property would be treated as citizens of the city-state. Right now, so that is the implication of the exclusions. What is citizenship? What is actually the meaning of citizenship according to Aristotle? What are the responsibilities of a citizen? According to Aristotle, citizenship is a duty to participate in the affairs of the state. Big city-states used to be very small, okay? And it was based on direct democracy because people were directly taking decisions for themselves. Why? Because the citizenship was confined to, with all this exclusion, citizenship was confined to a very small number of people. So, citizenship in Greek city-state, according to Aristotle, would mean a duty, a responsibility to participate directly in the affairs of the state. So, citizenship means involvement in the affairs of the state. So, those who do not have the time, those who do not have the capacity, those who do not have the time, those who do not have the capacity in civic affairs, they do not deserve to be called citizens. Try to understand the point. Those people who do not have the time, those people who do not have the ability to participate in the affairs of the state, they do not deserve to be citizen of the state according to Aristotle. All right, now let us try to understand why Aristotle is excluding the 4 categories of people from the citizenship rights. All right. What is the criteria of becoming a citizen? Criteria to participate, spend time, and participate in the affairs of the state. That is the criteria. That is the yardstick. Keep in mind that. Okay. So he excludes children because they do not have the reasoning or the kind of reasoning that they have that would not matter for the state. Okay. The kind of reasoning or the rationality that the children they would have, that is not needed for the state. So lack of a good reasoning and lack of a good rationality or absence of reasoning good reasoning and rationality among the children is the reason children are fickle-minded. So they cannot become the citizen of the state. All right. Now, similarly, old people are excluded from a citizenship rights because they are physically very weak. Because of their physical weakness, due to the higher age, they are physically become very weak, and they may not be in a position to participate in the affairs of the state. So old people, they are excluded because of that. Because of their age, because of the age factor, have become physically very weak, and they are not in a position to spend time. They are not in a position to participate in the, because yardstick is people's participation. So they are not in a position to participate. So that is why old people, they are also excluded. All right. Now, why women are excluded? Or Aristotle is justifying, giving a reason for excluding women. He says that women also do not have the time to participate in the affairs of the state because of their involvement in the household activities and in taking care of the family. Women are supposed to take care of household activities. They are supposed to take care of the needs of the family members. So they are supposed to take care of the needs of the children. So because of the involvement in household activities, they do not have the time to participate in the affairs of the state. So they are also excluded from the citizenship rights. Why? Because only that person could become a citizen who has a time and who has the capability to take a decision, to participate in the decision-making process. All right. Now, why slaves are excluded? Slaves are excluded because you know that they do not have a reason, they do not have a rationality to participate. They are intellectually not proficient, they are intellectually very weak, so they cannot participate in the affairs. So in his theory of citizenship, first Aristotle is giving the list of exclusion. Then he explaining what is citizenship. Citizenship means participation in the affairs of the state. And after doing that, he is giving explanation for the reasons. He is giving reasons for the exclusion, why he is excluding 4 categories of people from citizenship rights. Right now, according to Aristotle, city-states with a large population are not state in the real sense of the term. All right. He says that any city-state, if they increase the number of population, they are not the state. So according to Aristotle, state means city-state. All right. So he says that why he's talking about the small city-state and why he's not talking of the city-state and not talking of the big state. Because he says that when a state becomes big, when the population of the state goes on increasing, this means it would no longer be possible for big states. Right? Why? Because in order to take decisions directly, what is required is friendship among people. People must have a relationship among each other. So citizens, who are the citizens? Citizens are those people who have a very close friendship with each other because they have to participate in the decision-making process. So citizenship, the base of citizenship, according to Aristotle, is friendship among the people. And friendship is possible only among the small group. Friendship is not possible among the larger group of people. So if there is an increase of population, so friendship, which is a condition for citizenship, that would not be possible in a big state. That is why Aristotle is in favor of small city-state. All right. Now, so one of the essential conditions for maintaining citizenship is that the population should be small, because only when the population is small, there could be friendship among the people. And friendship is a very important yardstick for citizenship. All right, now. Two more points. Normally, you do not find in any other book, but if you look into Aristotle's book, Politics, so I do not find the mention of these which I'm going to mention now, I do not find this in the general textbooks where I have prescribed. They are not talking about that. So, so you should be mentioning some points, which should be, if you get a question on Aristotle's theory of citizenship. So I'm going to give you some points which normally nobody would be mentioning it. All right. Means, while talking about the citizenship, Aristotle says that there is a very little possibility of evolution of citizenship in the cold regions. And he's giving a reference of, he's giving an example of Persia. So there is a very extreme kind of climate. Right? So any place where there is extreme kind of climate, it is very developed, very difficult to develop, to evolve the citizenship among the people. Why? He says that in the colder regions like Persia, because people in the region, people in such region where the climate is so cold, okay, they could hardly manage. All right, they could hardly manage the means of their survival. So most of the time, they would just be bothered about the survival because there is survival is at stake. In extreme climatic condition, when it is so much cold, and he's giving a reference of state of Persia. He says the climate is so cold that the people they do not have a means. They just are bothering about. They just are concerned about how to manage their survival. So no scope for citizenship, no scope for them to engage in politics. So developing citizenship in extreme cold climate is almost impossible because you need time. Most of your time is consumed in managing yourself, okay, into ensuring your survival. So you don't have time. So developing citizenship in extreme cold climate is impossible according to Aristotle. Similarly, Aristotle says that in the hot region, where the temperature is so high, in the hot region, right, people, they become indolent, they become so dull. All right. So they would be prepared to, they would be prepared to accept any kind of despotic ruler, any kind of dictator. No, they would be prepared to, because they do not want to work. The climate is so bad, so hot. So they turn to be indolent, they turn to be so dull. So they would accept a despotic rule in order to escape from the hard work. All right. So they would prefer to be the slaves so that they don't have to spend the time in maintaining the state. So idea of citizenship would not flourish, according to Aristotle, in the extreme climatic condition. All right. Whether it is too cold or too hot. All right. Now, what is the status of citizen according to Aristotle? What kind of status they enjoy? Okay. Now, what is the status of your citizenship now in India? What is our status? We have virtually no status. No status in what sense? Means we are not participating in the affairs of the state. All right. Government doesn't bother about us. Government, the party in power or the opposition parties, the political parties who bothered about us only during the time of election. All right. So our citizenship just means, okay, that we get certain rights from the government, from the constitution. It means that we get access to certain things from the government. All right. More than that, it doesn't have any meaning. But according to Aristotle, citizenship means a status in society, and that too a superior status in society. Okay? Means anybody who is a citizen, the relationship between citizen and the government is a relationship of respect. Relationship between state and citizenship would be a relationship of respect. Means Aristotle says that relationship between citizen and a state is quite different from the relationship between masters and the slaves, or even a relationship between husband and wife. Okay, because relationship between masters and slaves is based on the idea of despotism, is based on the idea of control, one controlling over the other, right? Relationship between husband and wife is also based on one controlling the other. So he says that the relationship between citizen and state is quite different from relationship between masters and slaves, or the relationship between husband and wife, because these two relationships are based on controlling factor. Who controls whom? All right. But relationship between citizen and state is based on they are relationship between masters and slaves or husband and wife. They are naturally inferior relationship. All right. But relationship between citizen and state, or between rulers and the citizens, they are not in the same pattern. They are not in the same pattern. Rather, they are a relationship of respect. All right. And what kind of relationship you have? Because no decision can be taken without participation of the citizens. All right. So it is a relationship of respect. Relationship between state and citizen is a relationship of respect. All right. Now, that was briefly about the status of citizen in the Greek city-state. Now, let us do the critical evaluation of Aristotle's theory of cities. First of all, we cannot accept Aristotle's theory of Aristotle's theory of slavery in its totality. Aristotle's theory of citizenship cannot be accepted in its totality. The good point in Aristotle's theory of citizenship is that it involves people's participation in the affairs of the state. Means citizenship right is conditional to the people's participation in the affairs of the state. If you cannot participate, if you do not have time to participate, then you are not entitled to be getting citizenship right. That aspect is acceptable. That aspect is good, because citizenship is based on people's participation in the affairs of the state. Okay, so it produces a very alert citizen. It produces alert citizenry. All right. So from that perspective, it is good. But we cannot accept Aristotle's theory in its totality. Why? Because it is narrowly based. It is a narrow concept of citizenship. Why? Because it excludes women. Women are excluded from that. All right. And it also excludes the older people who are more experienced, more knowledgeable. So by denying citizenship rights, okay, to the old people and to the women, right, Aristotle's theory of citizenship is considered to be very narrow. So the basis of criticism is that Aristotle's theory of citizenship is narrowly based. All right. But so far as active involvement in the affairs of the state by citizens, that aspect can be appreciated. So, particularly, if I could refer here, if I could go at Hannah Arendt, Hannah-Arendt, Hannah Arendt. Hannah Arendt says that participation in civic affairs is the most fundamental human action, particularly in democracy. And when Aristotle is making that condition, what? People's participation in affairs of the state, a condition for citizens' right. So that way, even in modern day democracy, Aristotle's idea of citizenship, of involving people directly in the affairs of the state, right, would go a long way. In creating a good model of democracy. So in modern day democracy also, Aristotle's citizenship theory of citizenship could be relevant, particularly in context of the involvement of citizens in the affairs of the state. In that context, it is very much relevant in today's circumstances. But half of his theory, when he is denying citizenship right to the older people and the women, half of the population in our country is women. And if you deny them the citizenship rights, so that cannot be justified. So that was all about Aristotle's theory of citizenship. Any question if you have on Aristotle's theory of property and citizenship, you can just ask. It talked about Persia, the extreme cold condition talked about Persia, Persia. Some books names to quote as an example. See, book names, I have already given you some book names. I have already referred to book. What exactly your question? Pradeep, you are asking for some book names to quote as an examples in answers. See, when we talk about Plato, we talk about two books of Plato. One is Republic, another is Laws. If we talk about Aristotle, we talk about the book Politics. Right. So these names of the books, in any case, you have to remember. Now we're talking about Aristotle's theory of equality and justice. Aristotle's theory of equality and justice, because Aristotle's theory of equality and justice is integrated. All right. There cannot be any justice without equality, and there cannot be equality without justice. So justice and equality, they are integrated. Now, we are going to discuss Aristotle's theory of equality and justice. Let us see if we are able to complete that today. Okay. I would start with the quotation of Aristotle. What it says, it is equally unjust to treat unequals unequally. Sorry, it is equally unjust to treat unequals equally as it is unjust to treat equals unequally. What did I say? It is equally unjust. First part of this is it is equally unjust to treat unequals equally. What I mentioned a few moments back. Those people who are unequal, and if you treat them equally, means A and B. A is more talented and B is less talented. Okay? Two answer sheets in front of me. A's answer is better than B. Okay? And if I'm giving the same marks to both A and B, would it be fair? It would be unfair. Means A and B are unequal. Why unequal? Because A's answers are better than the B. So they are unequal. There is an inequality of performance. Both are unequal. So I shall say that it is equally unjust to treat unequals equally. A and B are unequal. And if I treat them equally, it would be unjust. Point is clear? Now, he says it is equally unjust to treat unequals equally as it is unjust to treat equals unequally. Those who are equal, and if you treat them equally, both A and B have got the same kind of mark, same mark, but you are qualifying A and you are disqualifying B despite both A and B being equal, both A and B having got the same kind of mark. That would also be unjust. Point is clear? What is saying? It is equally unjust to treat unequals equally as it is unjust to treat equals unequal. Okay? So this kind of questions have been asked several times. All right. So I just wanted to clarify that. Justice and equality in Aristotle's theory is closely integrated, closely linked. All right. Because theory of justice, according to Aristotle, has to be based on some concept of equality. Theory of justice according to Aristotle, has to be based on some concept of equality. Because if equality is not there, how can you expect justice to be there? All right. So some kind of equality is necessary for justice to be there. All right. Now, Aristotle's theory of justice is based on proportionate theory of justice. Yesterday I was talking about the mean, theory of mean, as given by Aristotle. Aristotle's theory of justice is based on proportionate justice. Means proportionate equality rather than absolute equality. Aristotle is talking about justice in terms of developing proportionate equality rather than absolute equality. Means you are entitled to be getting something in proportion to the merit that you have, in proportion to the capability that you have. What you will be getting should be or would be in proportion to the merit that you have. Right? So basically, he's talking about proportionate justice and proportionate equality. All right? Means Aristotle's theory of justice is basically a meritocratic concept of justice. How much you will be getting would be dependent on your merit, on your capability, on your talent. So Aristotle's theory of justice is also known as meritocratic concept of justice. You are entitled to get in proportion to what your qualities are, what your capabilities are. So it is called meritocratic concept of justice. Right. Now, what are the principles of his theory of equality and justice? Principle number 1, treat equals equally. The point is very clear. I have already explained. It means those who are equally capable and equally talented should not be discriminated by the state. Those who are equally talented and equally capable should not be discriminated by the state. So a state should not do any kind of favoritism. Right? They should treat equals equally. So people, if they are equally capable and talented, okay, they should not be discriminated on any ground. Because if the state does that, that would generate satisfaction among the people. All right, number 1. Number 2, second principle, I have already explained that. Means if state treats unequals equally. Earlier I was talking about treating equals unequally. Now I'm talking about second principle. If state treats unequals equally, that would also generate dissatisfaction in the society. If you are treating unequals equally, A and B, A is more talented than B. All right. So, but you are selecting B, not A. So this should also generate dissatisfaction in the society. So this is the link between theory of equality and theory of justice is very clear, because justice depends on the equality. All right. Going on further, I mean expanding further, it says that those who have a reason and courage, they ought to be treated as a masters. Those who have a reason, those who have a courage, those who are intellectually more capable, they should be treated as a masters. All right, that would be justice. If you are treating slaves and masters equally, that would be injustice, according to Aristotle. So those who have a reason as courage, they ought to be treated as masters. Those who lack reason and courage, they ought not to be treated as masters. They should be treated as slaves. Those who do not have a reason, those who have a reason and courage, they ought to be treated as masters. And those who do not have a reason and courage, they must not be treated as masters. They must be treated as slaves. So Aristotle is justifying a differential rewards Aristotle is providing a justification for a differential reward system. On what basis? You have a reason and courage, so you are rewarded, you become the masters. If you are lacking in that, you become slaves. All right. So differential rewards based on the fact whether you have a reason, whether the reason and courage is present, or whether the reason and courage is absent, based on that. All right. And the last point, last principle that Aristotle talks about, while talking about the principle of this, is that person should be rewarded in proportion to his contribution to the society. So again, a proportion justice. Everybody should be rewarded in proportion to what is their contribution for the state. All right. Now, but Aristotle is making a difference between manual contribution and intellectual contribution. That point you need to understand. All right. According to Aristotle, there is a direct link between justice and political stability. Because if people find the system to be unjust, Aristotle says, if people find the system to be unjust, they will be tempted to overthrow the system. So there is a direct connection between justice and political stability. Lack of justice would tempt people to overthrow the system. So lack of justice would create political instability. So there is a link between justice and political stability. All right. But if we look into, if we try to evaluate very, very briefly Aristotle's view on justice, what we find is that Aristotle's theory of justice could be criticized from the point of view of affirmative action. All right. Slaves would remain slaves throughout their life. All right. Now, in modern welfare state, if you talk about the positive liberals, they would try to bring about improvement in the life of the people by talking about reservation system, or by talking about affirmative action, by talking about the welfare state. And this is where Aristotle faltered in. This is the fault. This is where Aristotle faltered in, because so there is a criticism of Aristotle's theory of justice from the point of view of positive liberals. All right. Now, again, from socialist perspective also, Aristotle's theory of citizenship can be criticized, because from point of view of socialism, from the point of view of Marxism or communism, they are talking about equality of outcome. All right. They're talking about equality of outcome for the people living down the line. There must be improvement in the life of the people who are living the line. The people who have been exploited since time immemorial, okay? There must be improvement in the quality of their life. So dividing society into masters and slaves, and then going on defending the institution of slavery, not giving them enough rights, that would not be justified from the Marxian perspective. All right. So slaves also need a very respectable life. They also need to grow in life. They also need a basic amenities of life. But Aristotle, by dividing society into masters and slaves, is basically distorting the theory of justice. All right. So criticism of Aristotle's theory from the liberals' positive liberals' point of view, and from the socialist perspective, from both the perspectives. All right. Now, so that was about Aristotle's theory of equality and justice. And what is left now is Aristotle's theory of constitution that we have not been able to do, and Aristotle's theory of revolution. This would try to complete tomorrow, and would also start with see in what half an hour or so we'll complete Aristotle, and we would start with Machiavelli. All right. So thank you so much, all of you. God bless you all. See you tomorrow. All right.